So last week, I went through a portal that takes you into Super Mario World, and it completely blew my mind and transformed how I think about storytelling as well. Hi, I'm Richard Newman. I've been studying communication for over 30 years, and I'll be sharing with you on this channel some of the best things that I've learned to help you succeed in critical situations. It's extraordinary what they have created. This park, which is the Universal Epic Park in Orlando. I've been to adventure theme parks, amusement parks since I was a kid, but I wasn't expecting this. So we went there because my son really wanted to go, and it was going to be like a special journey to go and see some theme parks. And a lot of the places in Orlando I'd seen before, but I'd never seen Epic, which has just opened about a year ago. And they spent $4 billion creating a whole story and worlds that you can go into that are separate to each other. And so when you go into Super Mario World, of course, what you have to do is you have to get sucked up the pipe that then spits you out into the Super Mario World. And when you get there, it's extraordinary what it does to your brain, how you enter this part of the park. And, you know, in the rest of the park, they've got like a Harry Potter universe and a dark universe, and they've got how to Train Your Dragon universe. But each of them are completely separate and completely different worlds. So when you get into the Mario area, you cannot see anything else in existence apart from this world. And you think, Mario had a dream and he created this space, and now this is all that exists around me. And, you know, all the stuff you'd imagine, like you've got Princess Peach's castle, and you've got, you know, the big sort of gold boxes with a question mark on. If you punch them, it goes bida-ding, and you're sort of collecting coins around this thing, and all the characters are there. And what was beautiful about it too is that they built up the walls around this part of the park. So all you could see is you get to the top of the wall, and then you just see beautiful blue sky and clouds, and it really feels like you have entered another universe. And as we were going through this, what does this create? It creates a sense for anybody who's there of playfulness. If you can imagine the difference between walking through your average street in a city with all the different steel and glass buildings and people in suits and going from one job to the next, versus being in a place where everybody of every age and every background has decided to embrace their childlike nature and their imagination. And there was a giddiness amongst everybody. And so I was really struck by this sense of this mental place of imagination that Universal have been able to tap into for everybody by being so specific with this environment that they created and the stories that unfolded within it. So a part of that, there's a roller coaster within Super Mario World where, just like it would happen within Mario's adventures, you know, part of the roller coaster is broken. And so, you know, you sort of go over and you think, what are we going to do? And you skip over the track and you go on to another piece and you enter into the excitement. Obviously, you're not going to crash because, you know, you're there at a theme park. But you enter into this spirit of playfulness because of what they've created. And it really got me thinking about all of the storytelling that I teach. You know, what can you take from Universal Epic and then translate into day-to-day boardrooms? But what it made me think is, well, how much work are we really doing in companies or in conferences or in events to really build up the walls around us and say, this is what exists. This is our world. This is our universe. This is what it means. And this is the headspace it creates for our team. This is the headspace that it creates for our customers when they're interacting with us. They go to a different place in their head, a different place in their heart, a different place in their body when they experience us. And this is something that really successful brands, really successful team cultures have built up through the years, where if you think about the heyday of Steve Jobs at Apple, what do they sell? They sell computers. And Simon Sinek delivered this beautifully when he was talking about in his TED Talk, Start With Why. How is it that suddenly people got obsessed with computers and MP3 players and phones? Why? Because Apple built a universe where you go to a different place in your head, a different place in your heart, and a different place in your body when you experience their products. How do they do that? Through extraordinary storytelling and magnificent attention to detail on every one of their devices on the inside and on the outside. And that's exactly what they're creating at Epic. And other great brands, whatever brand that people love to engage with, we love to engage with it because we go to a different place in ourselves. Like if you get people who love a fashion brand and they go into a Gucci store or they go into a Tiffany store or whatever store they like, there's a different part of their brain and a different part of their heart being engaged by that experience. This can all be translated into a boardroom or into a conference as well, because you can see people who get up on stage or get up in the front of the room and it's just business as usual. And they're saying, here's my spreadsheet, here's my update. And then somebody in the same environment can step up on that same stage or the front of that same room on that same day, and they tell a story, and everything changes in that room about the headspace that people are going to play in for the rest of that day based on what they've done. And like I always say to people, you can take anything and turn it into a story. You can take a spreadsheet, which is the quarterly update, and turn it into a story. And as soon as you understand what a storytelling framework looks like, and you start to use words like, what if this happened? Imagine this. Wouldn't it be extraordinary if we just for a moment allowed ourselves to think about this concept? And people go to this storytelling space. And it's a space that we've had ever since we were a kid. I remember this, and I'm sure many people do as well. This idea of, when I was just about to go to sleep, my parents would come and read me a little bit of a book. And I would venture into a headspace based on that book that would then give me these brilliant and wonderful dreams. And sometimes when I'm coaching people in business saying you really need to use storytelling, they'll say, well, I've used storytelling in the past. We've heard of storytelling. Somebody came and talked to us about storytelling. It doesn't work. It's not really for us. We're not really sure it's a thing. And they might also say it's all very well for Universal creating this epic park. They've got $4 billion. We don't have a budget for our conference. We can barely afford to pay for lighting. And, they've got this $4 billion. Or, if you talk about a story such as an Avatar movie being made for $300 million to tell that story, the piece that I often come back to is to say to people, have you ever read a book and the place you went to in your head, the imagination of what you created as you were reading the words on that page was actually better than the experience of going to watch the movie? And everybody's had that situation at some point where you go and watch the movie, you're sort of excited, you're a little bit nervous thinking, are they going to ruin my favorite book? And then you go and you think, that's not what it looked like in my head when I was reading these words off a page. And so the same is true in day-to-day work. When you send an email, when you create a PDF document, just putting words on a page can be more powerful than a $300 million budget if you use the right words in the right order to spark off someone's imagination. And you can be the speaker at your next team conference. If you understand what words to say, what order to say them, how to say them, you can be more powerful than a $300 million budget. Tony Robbins is famous for saying this, where he said, people won't sit through a 3 or 4 hour movie, but he has people sit through 16 hours a day at his events where it's just him talking to a room full of people and a couple of slides. What I've also seen with speakers at conferences is that sometimes people say, well, it's the people in the room, they weren't reacting well, so I couldn't really do stories and stuff, or the venue here is not very good, or the lighting's not very good, or the sound equipment's not very good. And you see the right speaker step up on the same stage in front of the same people and tell a story, understanding how you tell a story, what you need to say, how you need to deliver it, and suddenly they can transform that event, how everybody feels when they're leaving, when they're going to the coffee break. They're in a different headspace entirely because of that. And that's why it's so important. If you're booking an event, if you're an event planner, meeting planner, you're creating a conference, to get the right person to do the keynote. And the reason it's called the keynote, the opening keynote and the closing keynote, is that it is setting the tone for the emotional headspace that everybody is going to be playing in for the rest of that experience. It says, this is the sandbox. This is how we're going to feel. This is where our imagination is going to head in that direction of. This is going to prime everybody for everything else that's going to happen. And when you do a closing keynote, if you can tell a powerful story, you can wrap together everything that people were trying to process and give them a mood, a feeling that they leave with that allows them to take all the value of that event forwards. And that's why I care so much about storytelling. I loved experiencing it when it cost $4 billion for Universal, and thank you to them for investing that so that we can all go and enjoy it. But that's why it matters so much that people do it every day, because Every single person loves tuning into storytelling. You've just got to know how to do it and practice and dedicate yourself to getting it right. Hey, I'm Richard Newman. I've been studying communication for over 30 years. I've written a couple of books on this and published my own unique research on behavioral science. And if that's your kind of thing, if you love body language, communication, storytelling, then do follow, subscribe, and I'd love to hear what you think about this video so we can keep on making great content for you.